The first sign my wife was lying to me wasn't a text message or a hotel receipt. It was a bag of dog food. We didn't own a dog. I found it in the trunk of her SUV on a Thursday night while looking for the jumper cables. It was a 40-pound bag, already opened, folded over neatly at the top. Next to it sat a blue tennis ball covered in short brown hair and a stainless steel water bowl. When I carried the bowl into the house, Lauren was standing at the kitchen island scrolling through her phone. "Whose dog?" I asked. She looked at the bowl, then at me. For about half a second, her face went completely blank. Then she laughed. "Oh, that." Apparently, a woman from her office had gone out of town, and Lauren had agreed to stop by her house after work to feed her dog. Simple explanation, normal favor. Nothing worth thinking about. Except Lauren had complained for years that dogs made her clothes smell. She wouldn't even sit on my brother's couch because his golden retriever slept there. Now she was hauling around dog food like she worked at PetSmart. I set the bowl down and asked which coworker it belonged to. Melissa. There was no Melissa at her office. I knew that because Lauren had worked at the same dental practice for 6 years, and I'd met everyone there at Christmas dinners, summer cookouts, and one painfully long escape room birthday party. I could name both hygienists, all 3 assistants, the receptionist, the office manager, and the dentist who owned the place. No Melissa. Lauren picked up her glass of wine. She's new. That was possible. I nodded, put the bowl back in the garage, and told myself not to become the kind of husband who conducted employee audits over dog food. At the time, I thought that was me being reasonable. Looking back, I was mostly being convenient. Lauren and I had been married for 9 years. We lived outside Columbus in a neighborhood where every house had the same gray siding, and every garage contained at least one piece of exercise equipment nobody used. I was 37 and worked as a project manager for a commercial construction company. Lauren was 35 and handled insurance billing for the dental office. We didn't have kids. That had been a painful subject for a while, then a quiet one, then something we stopped discussing unless a family member brought it up at Thanksgiving. Our marriage wasn't perfect, but it also wasn't visibly failing. We still ate dinner together most nights. We watched football on Sundays. We argued about thermostat settings and whose turn it was to buy paper towels. There were no screaming matches, no separate bedrooms, no dramatic threats. What had changed was smaller. Lauren had started getting home later. Not every night. Just often enough that I noticed. The office closed at 5, but she'd walk in at 6:30 or 7 and say there had been insurance problems, late patients, or paperwork she wanted to finish before the next morning. That explanation made sense because insurance companies seem to survive entirely by making normal people miserable. I never pushed. Then came the phone. Lauren had always left it everywhere. Kitchen counter, bathroom sink, under the couch cushions. Once I found it in the refrigerator next to the mustard. A few months earlier, she started carrying it from room to room. She'd place it face down during dinner. She changed the passcode. When it buzzed, she looked at the screen before deciding whether to pick it up. I noticed all of that. I also noticed that noticing it made me feel ridiculous. There's a strange period in a marriage where you can see several things that don't add up, but each one has a harmless explanation. You either trust the explanations or admit you're building a case against the person sleeping beside you. I wasn't ready to build a case. 2 days after I found the dog food, Lauren said she had to work Saturday morning. That was unusual. The practice opened one Saturday a month, but this wasn't the scheduled weekend. "Emergency patients," she said while putting on mascara in the bathroom mirror. "Since when do insurance billing people treat emergencies?" She smiled at me through the mirror. "Since dentists need to get paid." Fair enough. She left around 8:30 wearing jeans, a cream sweater, and ankle boots. Not work clothes. I almost mentioned it, but she said they weren't seeing regular patients. And I let it go. Around noon, I drove to Home Depot for shelf brackets. I'd been putting off fixing the storage room for 6 months, which meant Lauren had reminded me approximately 40 times. The dental office was on the way. I didn't decide to check on her. That's what I told myself anyway. I turned into the shopping center because I wanted coffee from the place beside her office. It was the kind of excuse you create for yourself so quickly that you almost respect the effort. The parking lot was mostly empty. Lauren's SUV wasn't there. I parked near the coffee shop and looked through the front windows of the dental practice. The lights were off. The door had a handwritten sign taped inside, "Closed this Saturday." I sat in my truck for a full minute. Then I called her. She didn't answer. I waited and called again. Nothing. 5 minutes later, she texted, "Can't talk. Dealing with a patient issue." I read it twice. Then I took a picture of the dark office. I didn't send it. Instead, I drove home and put the shelf brackets on the kitchen counter. I spent the next 2 hours doing normal things badly. I started laundry and forgot detergent. I watched half an episode of a show without understanding a single scene. I opened the refrigerator 3 times and never took anything out. Lauren came home at 3:10. She looked relaxed. That bothered me more than it should have. "Long morning?" I asked. She dropped her purse onto a chair. "You have no idea." I waited for her to add something. She didn't. "What kind of emergency?" She walked to the refrigerator and took out a bottle of water. "Billing issue." "With a patient?" She twisted the cap and looked at me. "Yes." "On a day the office was closed?" The bottle stopped halfway to her mouth. It was only a second. Maybe less. Then she frowned. "What are you talking about?" I drove by. Her expression changed, but not in the way I expected. She didn't panic. She got annoyed. "You checked on me?" "I went to Home Depot." That's not what I asked. The office was dark, Lauren. She looked away and took a drink. Then she sighed like I was making her explain something exhausting. "We met at Dr. Brennan's other location." Dr. Brennan didn't have another location. I knew that because I'd helped him review a contractor's estimate when he remodeled the office 2 years earlier. He'd talked for 40 minutes about wanting to open a second practice, but not having the money. I could have said that. Instead, I asked where the other location was. Lauren picked up her purse. "Why are you interrogating me?" "I asked where you were." "And I told you." "No. You gave me 2 different answers." She stared at me for a few seconds. Then her face softened. It was a quick shift. Almost professional. She stepped closer and touched my arm. "I'm sorry. I should have explained better." According to the new version, she had met Dr. Brennan and an insurance representative at a rented office suite across town. They were discussing a possible expansion, and he didn't want the staff knowing yet. That story was more detailed. It was also worse. Dr. Brennan wasn't the kind of man who held secret business meetings on Saturdays. He was the kind of man who accidentally replied to the entire office when ordering lunch. Still, I nodded. Lauren kissed my cheek and said she was going to shower. A few minutes later, I heard the bathroom door lock. She had never locked that door in 9 years. I stood in the hallway looking at it. Then her phone buzzed inside her purse. She'd left it on the kitchen chair. I didn't touch it. I wish I could say that was because I respected her privacy. The truth is, I was afraid of what I'd see. The screen lit up again. No message preview. Just a notification from an app I didn't recognize. A small green icon with a white paw print. I took out my own phone and searched for it yet. It was a dog walking app. For a second, I actually felt relieved. Maybe there really was a coworker. Maybe Lauren had created an account to help feed the dog. Maybe every strange thing had a boring explanation. And I was about to become the idiot husband who ruined his marriage because of a tennis ball. Then, I noticed the notification wasn't from the app itself. It was a direct message. The sender's name was displayed above the icon. Evan R. I knew one Evan. He lived 20 minutes away in Dublin, had a brown Labrador named Scout, and had been married to Lauren's college roommate for 11 years. His wife had died the previous spring. Lauren had gone to the funeral alone. I'd been out of state for work and couldn't make it back. When she returned, she told me Evan looked terrible and said she planned to check on him occasionally because people disappear after funerals. I told her that was kind. Standing in our kitchen with her phone buzzing beside me, I started wondering how often she had been checking. The shower turned off upstairs. I stepped away from the purse. Lauren came down 10 minutes later wearing sweatpants, her hair wrapped in a towel. She glanced at the kitchen chair before she looked at me. That was new too. What? She asked. Nothing. She picked up her phone and checked it. Her thumb moved quickly across the screen. Then she slid the phone into her pocket. That night, she fell asleep around 11. I stayed awake beside her until after midnight, staring at the ceiling. Eventually, I got up and went downstairs. I opened Facebook and searched for Evan. His profile was mostly private, but his cover photo showed him standing beside Scout in front of a red brick house. The dog had short brown hair. There was a blue tennis ball near Evan's shoe. I enlarged the picture until it became blurry. Then I looked toward the garage. The water bowl was still sitting on the workbench where I'd left it. I didn't know what Lauren was doing. I didn't know how long she'd been doing it. But I finally understood one thing. There was no Melissa. I didn't sleep much that night. Not because I was planning some dramatic confrontation. My brain just kept replaying the same handful of details, trying to force them into a version that made sense. Dog food, a fake coworker, a closed office, a Saturday meeting that probably never happened, and Evan. Every one of those things had an explanation if I worked hard enough to invent one. Together, they started looking less like coincidences and more like pieces from the same puzzle. Sunday morning felt strangely normal. Lauren made pancakes. She complained that we were almost out of coffee. We watched the pregame show while she folded laundry on the couch. If someone had walked into our house, they would have seen a completely ordinary married couple. That almost made it worse. Around noon, her phone buzzed twice. She didn't even look at me before picking it up. I'll be right back. She walked out to the back patio. Not because it was quiet out there. The neighbors' kids were screaming around a trampoline. She went outside because I wasn't. When she came back a few minutes later, she smiled. Evan? I asked. Her head snapped toward me. What? The guy whose wife passed away. She stared for just a little too long. Yeah. How's he doing? She shrugged. Still struggling? I should invite him over sometime. No. The answer came out faster than either of us expected. Lauren immediately corrected herself. I mean, not yet. He's still grieving. I get that. She nodded once and changed the subject. We should repaint the guest room. That was Lauren's favorite move whenever she wanted to leave a conversation without looking like she was leaving it. By Monday morning, I had convinced myself I needed facts instead of theories. Suspicion by itself doesn't accomplish anything. It just makes you miserable. I got to work around 7:30 and tried to focus on a meeting with one of our subcontractors. I made it about 15 minutes before realizing I'd agreed to a delivery schedule that made absolutely no sense. My assistant, Chris, noticed. "You all right? Didn't sleep. You look like you're trying to solve a murder." "I hope it's less paperwork than that," he laughed. I didn't. At lunch, I did something I'd never done before. I drove to Lauren's office, not to spy. At least that's what I kept telling myself. I parked across the street and watched people come and go. About 20 minutes later, Lauren walked outside carrying a salad. She wasn't alone. The man beside her was in his early 40s, maybe a little older, wearing navy scrubs with the office logo stitched over the pocket. Dr. Brennan. They talked for a minute before he climbed into his truck. Lauren headed the other direction, toward a small cafe. She sat alone. No mysterious man. No secret lunch. Nothing. I almost laughed at myself. Maybe I'd built an entire conspiracy out of dog food and bad timing. I was about to leave when another SUV pulled into the lot. Dark gray Ford Explorer. The driver stayed inside. Lauren looked up from her phone. She stood. Instead of walking toward the cafe entrance, she crossed the parking lot. She leaned into the passenger window. The conversation lasted less than a minute. Then she smiled. Really smiled. Not the polite smile she'd given Dr. Brennan. This one reached her eyes. The SUV pulled away. Lauren watched it leave before returning to her lunch. I couldn't see the driver clearly. Just a man wearing a baseball cap. That was enough to erase the relief I'd felt 30 seconds earlier. Back at work, I kept thinking about that smile. It wasn't romantic. At least I couldn't say that honestly. But it was familiar. It was the kind of smile she used to give me when I surprised her with concert tickets or suggested an unplanned weekend trip. It wasn't about attraction. It was comfort, recognition, history. That evening, Lauren got home around 6. She seemed cheerful. She even asked if I wanted to order pizza. Halfway through dinner, I said, as casually as I could, "How's Dr. Brennan?" She looked up. "Fine. I saw him today." "You stopped by again?" "I was nearby." She took another bite before answering. "He had a root canal scheduled." "I actually saw you talking to someone in the parking lot." Her hand stopped. "Who?" "I couldn't tell." "Oh." She looked back at her plate. "Probably a delivery driver, asking where another office was." "You smiled at the delivery driver." She shrugged. "I smile at people." Fair point. Except she didn't. Lauren was friendly, but strangers usually described her as reserved. She wasn't rude, just efficient. Now she was smiling at delivery drivers. Later that night, she fell asleep on the couch during a movie. Her phone slipped between the cushions. I stared at it for almost a full minute. I hated the person I'd become over the last 3 days. I hated that every instinct told me to pick it up. I hated that another part of me thought I'd regret it if I didn't. Finally, I reached down. The screen lit up. Locked. Face ID. As I started putting it back, another notification appeared. The preview was visible this time. "Scout loved seeing you today." My stomach tightened. There wasn't much text after that, just same time Thursday? No heart emojis, no flirting, no obvious affair. Just one sentence that somehow made everything feel more complicated. Scout. The Labrador from Evan's Facebook picture. I set the phone exactly where I'd found it. A minute later, Lauren woke up. She stretched, picked up her phone, glanced at the screen, and deleted the notification before standing. You coming to bed? In a minute. She disappeared upstairs. I waited until I heard the bedroom door close. Then I opened my laptop. This time I didn't search for Evan. I searched public property records. His address came up in less than a minute. 23 minutes from our house. I almost closed the browser. Instead, I opened Google Street View. The red brick house looked exactly like the Facebook picture. One thing caught my attention. A security camera over the garage, then another above the front porch, and one facing the driveway. If Lauren had been visiting him for months, those cameras had probably recorded every single visit. I spent most of Tuesday telling myself not to do anything stupid. There's a line between paying attention and becoming obsessed, and I could feel myself getting closer to it every hour. The easiest thing would have been to confront Lauren again. The problem was, I already knew how that conversation would go. She'd deny everything. I'd mention another inconsistency. She'd explain it. I'd leave with more questions than answers. That wasn't a conversation anymore. It was a routine. So I decided I wasn't asking another question until I had something she couldn't explain away. Wednesday afternoon, my phone rang while I was at work. It was my younger sister, Emily. You busy? Depends who's asking, she laughed. Mom wants everyone over Sunday. Dad finally figured out the new grill. So we're all risking food poisoning. Pretty much. We talked for a few minutes before she asked how Lauren was doing. She's fine. You sure? Why? Emily hesitated. I almost didn't say anything. Now you have to. I saw her last week. That got my attention. Where? The dog park by Riverside. I frowned. Lauren doesn't go to dog parks. I know. Are you sure it was her? I waved. You talked? No. She didn't see me. She was walking with some guy. I stayed quiet. They had a brown lab, Emily continued. I figured maybe they'd adopted a dog. We haven't. Oh. Another pause. I probably saw someone else. Maybe. But neither of us believed that. After we hung up, I pulled up the dog park on Google Maps. It was less than 10 minutes from Evan's house. Coincidence? Maybe. Everything still could have been coincidence. That evening, Lauren came home carrying takeout from my favorite barbecue place. She almost never stopped for food after work. I figured neither of us wanted to cook. It was thoughtful, genuine. She sat across from me while we ate and told me about one of the patients who'd insisted insurance should cover cosmetic whitening because it improved mental health. I laughed. She laughed too. For almost an hour, everything felt normal again. Then her smartwatch buzzed. Not her phone, her watch. She glanced at it for less than a second. I'm going to take a shower. She hadn't even finished eating. The watch came with her. The phone stayed on the table. That was interesting. I wasn't expecting an opportunity. When the bathroom door closed upstairs, I picked up her phone. Locked. Again. I wasn't trying to unlock it this time. I opened the recent notifications on the lock screen. Most were hidden, except one. Walk completed. 47 minutes. Same green paw icon. Dog walking app. Timestamp 6:08 p.m. Lauren had walked a dog less than an hour before coming home. Except she'd told me she'd worked late because insurance claims had backed up before the end of the month. One of those things wasn't true. She came downstairs 15 minutes later, hair still wet. You okay? Why? You've barely said anything. Long day. She nodded. I know the feeling. Thursday morning, I left for work at my normal time. Instead of driving downtown, I pulled into a grocery store parking lot about a mile from our house. I waited. At 8:17, Lauren drove past. I gave her plenty of distance. If anyone had told me a week earlier I'd be following my own wife, I would have thought they were out of their mind. Now I was counting traffic lights and trying not to lose sight of her. She drove exactly where I expected. To the dental office. She parked, went inside. Nothing unusual. I almost turned around. Instead, I waited. At 11:52, she walked back outside, not carrying a purse, just her phone. She got into her SUV and left. I followed again. She didn't head toward a restaurant, or a grocery store, or another medical office. She drove to a neighborhood on the north side of town. Quiet streets, older brick homes, large oak trees. She slowed near the end of a cul-de-sac, then pulled into the driveway of a familiar house. Red brick, white shutters, 3 security cameras. Evan's house. I parked half a block away where my truck blended in with several others lining the street. Lauren didn't knock. She walked straight to the front door. Before she reached it, the door opened. Evan stepped outside. He smiled. Scout came charging across the yard with a tennis ball in his mouth. Lauren bent down to pet him. The dog practically tackled her. That wasn't how dogs greet someone they've met once or twice. That was how they greeted someone who came over all the time. Evan laughed. Even from that distance, I could tell he looked healthier than he had in the funeral pictures. Lauren tossed the tennis ball. Scout sprinted after it. Then the 3 of them disappeared into the backyard. I looked at the clock. 12:08. If Lauren really had a lunch break, she had about an hour. I told myself to leave. I'd confirmed she was visiting him. That alone wasn't proof of an affair. She told me months ago she wanted to check on him. Maybe she'd simply never stopped. Maybe she'd hidden it because she knew how strange it looked. I started the truck, then stopped. The backyard wasn't visible from the street, but the side gate was slightly open. Through the gap, I could hear voices, mostly laughter. I shut the engine off again. 38 minutes passed. No shouting, no kissing, no obvious intimacy, just conversation. Eventually, Lauren came back around the side of the house carrying Scout's leash. She clipped it on while Evan locked the front door. Then the 3 of them walked down the sidewalk together. It looked comfortable, like a routine. Scout stayed between them, weaving back and forth. Lauren bumped Evan's shoulder after he said something. He laughed. She laughed harder. For one brief second, she reached out and brushed something off his sleeve. It wasn't romantic. It was familiar. That somehow bothered me even more. When the walk ended, they stood beside her SUV. Evan leaned into the driver's window. They talked for another minute. Then Lauren reached across the center console. His hand disappeared inside the vehicle. When he stepped back, he was holding a paper grocery bag. He smiled, tapped the roof of her SUV twice, and walked back toward the house. Lauren drove away. I waited until she disappeared before pulling closer. The paper recycling bin sat near the curb. On top of it was a flattened bag from the same barbecue restaurant she'd brought home for dinner the night before. 2 meals, family pack, serves 4. I stared at it for a long moment. Lauren had told me she'd picked up dinner on the way home. She had. She'd just eaten the first half somewhere else. I drove home a different way. Not because I was lost. Because I needed 20 extra minutes before I walked through my own front door. My head kept circling the same question. If Lauren was just helping a widower, why lie about it? She could have told me she'd been checking on Evan after his wife died. I might have thought she was overdoing it, but I wouldn't have stopped her. Instead, she'd invented coworkers, fake meetings, and imaginary office locations. People don't build that many lies around something innocent. By the time I got home, Lauren was already there. Her SUV sat in the driveway like every other weekday. She was standing at the stove stirring pasta sauce. "You got home early," she said. "So did you." She smiled without looking up. "I skipped lunch." That almost made me laugh. "You skipped lunch?" "Too busy." "I know how those days go," she nodded. No hesitation, no guilt. Just another lie added to the pile. Dinner was surprisingly pleasant. She asked about one of my construction projects. I told her the city inspector had found another issue with the drainage plans. She rolled her eyes. Somebody has to justify their salary. Apparently. For a few minutes, we sounded like ourselves again. Then she reached for the Parmesan cheese. Her phone buzzed. She glanced at it. Not even a full second. But I caught the tiny smile before she hit it. She turned the screen face down. That smile wasn't meant for me. Friday morning, I made a decision. I wasn't going to follow her again. If I kept chasing every movement, I'd lose whatever judgment I had left. Instead, I called someone who actually knew Evan, my cousin Nate. They'd played softball together for years before life got busy. After a little small talk, I asked, "You still hear from Evan?" "Every now and then." "How's he doing?" "Better lately." "What changed?" Nate laughed. He finally stopped isolating himself. "Meaning?" "Some volunteer from that grief support group started checking in on him." I kept my voice even. "A volunteer?" "Yeah. Walks his dog sometimes. Makes sure he eats actual food instead of frozen pizza." "When did that start?" "I don't know. Maybe 6 months ago." 6 months. Long before I'd noticed anything unusual. "What's funny," Nate continued, "is he wouldn't tell anybody her name for the longest time." "Really?" "Said he didn't want people talking." That sentence sat with me. People talking. Meaning they already knew how it looked. "So who is she?" "I honestly don't know." "You never asked." I figured if he wanted people to know, he'd say. After we hung up, I leaned back in my office chair. A grief support volunteer. Lauren had never mentioned volunteering anywhere. She barely had time to keep up with her own schedule. Either Nate had the wrong information, or someone had created a convenient explanation. Around 3 that afternoon, my phone rang again. Unknown number. I almost ignored it. "Hello? Is this Daniel?" "Yes." "This is Dr. Brennan." That got my attention immediately. "I hope I'm not bothering you." "Not at all. I actually needed to ask you something." He explained that the office wanted to remodel 2 treatment rooms over the winter, and Lauren had mentioned I worked in commercial construction. She'd apparently suggested he call me before collecting bids. Perfectly normal. Except one detail bothered me. We talked for 10 minutes about permits, scheduling, and contractors. Just before hanging up, I said casually, "Lauren told me you were looking at opening a second office." Silence. "A second office?" "Yeah." He chuckled. "I wish." "So, no plans?" "My wife would probably leave me if I took on another building." We both laughed. Then we said goodbye. I stared at my phone after the call ended. That was it. 1 lie was no longer suspicious. 2 could still be coincidence. 3 became a pattern. By the time you reached 4, you weren't dealing with misunderstandings anymore. You were dealing with intent. That evening, Lauren came home carrying grocery bags. I thought we'd grill tomorrow. Sounds good. She unpacked burgers, vegetables, buns, chips, and 2 bags of premium dog treats. She froze the second she realized I'd seen them. Oh, she looked down. I forgot those were in there. You shopping for Melissa again? She closed the pantry door. I told you. No. I interrupted her for the first time all week. You told me about Melissa. You told me about Saturday. You told me about another office. You told me you worked through lunch yesterday. She crossed her arms. So you've been keeping score. I've been listening. For several seconds, neither of us spoke. Finally, she exhaled. They're for Evan. I know. Her eyes narrowed. What do you mean you know? I know you've been seeing him. She didn't answer. I know about the dog walks. Still nothing. I know about the lunches. A flicker crossed her face. Not panic. Calculation. What exactly do you think is happening? I've stopped guessing. So tell me. I'd rather hear it from you. She looked toward the window, then back at me. I'm helping someone who lost his wife. By lying to your husband? I knew you'd react like this. No. I shook my head. You knew I'd ask questions. Because you don't understand. Then explain it. She opened her mouth, closed it again. After nearly a minute, she quietly said, I can't. Those 2 words hit harder than any denial could have. Not because they proved an affair. Because they proved she was protecting something. Maybe Evan. Maybe herself. Maybe both. Lauren grabbed her purse from the kitchen counter. I need some air. She walked out the front door before I could answer. A minute later, her SUV backed out of the driveway. I didn't follow her. For the first time all week, I stayed exactly where I was. An hour later, my phone vibrated. Not from Lauren. From an unknown number. The message contained only one sentence. If you really want the truth about your wife, stop following her and come talk to me instead. Underneath it was an address. I recognized it immediately. It was Evan's house. I didn't answer the text right away. I read it 5 or 6 times, hoping I'd notice something I'd missed. The number wasn't saved in my phone. No signature, no explanation. Just an address I already knew. Lauren still wasn't home. I considered calling her. Instead, I grabbed my keys. If this was some kind of setup, I'd deal with that when I got there. The drive felt shorter than usual. Evan's porch light was already on by the time I pulled into the driveway. He opened the front door before I reached it. You actually came, he said. I wasn't sure I would. I wasn't sure either. He stepped aside. Come in. Scout wandered over with his tennis ball, dropped it at my feet, then lost interest when I didn't throw it. Inside, the house looked different from the last time I'd seen pictures online. Still lived in. Still quiet. But no longer frozen in time. The family photos were still on the walls, but some had been moved. Fresh flowers sat on the dining table. The place looked like someone had started living again, instead of simply existing. You want coffee? Evan asked. No. He nodded. Probably for the best. We sat across from each other in the living room for almost a minute before either of us spoke. Finally, I said, You texted me. I did. You wanted to tell me the truth. I wanted you to hear it from me, instead of imagining something worse. I didn't respond. He rubbed his hands together. The first time Lauren came here was 3 days after my wife's funeral. I know. She brought groceries. I stayed quiet. I didn't ask her to. She said she didn't want me sitting alone every night. He looked toward the kitchen. I almost told her not to come back. Why didn't you? Because she was the only person who kept showing up. He wasn't accusing anyone, just stating a fact. The first month, he continued, people called every day. The second month, every week. After that, he shrugged. Life moved on for everybody else. But not for you. He nodded. Not for me. I could understand that. Didn't mean I liked where the story seemed to be heading. So why all the lies? He sighed. Because of me. I frowned. I asked her not to tell anyone. Why? Because I knew exactly what people would think. He smiled without humor. A married woman visiting a widower several times a week. I've lived in this town long enough. He wasn't wrong. I figured if people believed she was volunteering through a support group, they'd leave us alone. They didn't. They started asking questions anyway. He leaned forward. So Lauren stopped mentioning it and started lying to me. His shoulders dropped. I told her that was a mistake. She said she didn't want to upset you until she figured out how to explain everything. Then every week it became harder. Then every month. Eventually the lie became bigger than the truth. I looked around the room. That's all? He met my eyes. Yes. I held his gaze. No affair? No? You expect me to believe that? I don't expect anything. He stood. Come here. He walked into the kitchen. I followed. A whiteboard hung beside the refrigerator. It wasn't a calendar. It was a medication schedule, therapy appointments, grocery lists, emergency contacts, phone numbers. Lauren's name appeared twice. Once beside veterinarian appointments. Once beside a reminder that read, "Don't forget to eat before your evening walk," Lauren will ask. Evan smiled faintly. She started treating me like an older brother who couldn't be trusted to take care of himself. I stared at the board. You can check my phone. What? You heard me. He unlocked it and handed it over. Every conversation between him and Lauren was there. Hundreds of messages, dog photos, shopping lists, questions about medication, arguments over whether he'd actually eaten lunch, reminders about therapy appointments, occasional jokes. Nothing romantic, nothing hidden, nothing deleted. The longest conversation wasn't about feelings. It was about whether Scout should switch to a different brand of dog food because he'd been scratching too much. I kept scrolling, looking for something, anything. There wasn't a single message that crossed the line. Just two people trying to keep a third one from falling apart. I finally handed the phone back. So why didn't Lauren just show me this? Because she was embarrassed. Evan. No, he interrupted gently. She was embarrassed because every time she lied, it got harder to admit she'd lied. I understood that. Didn't make it hurt less. Headlights swept across the front window. Lauren. She came through the front door looking from me to Evan. I figured you'd come here, she said quietly. Neither of us answered. She looked exhausted. Not frightened. Just tired. I'm done lying. I folded my arms. Then start talking. She sat on the couch across from us. The first few visits were supposed to be temporary. I know. I told myself I'd tell you after he was doing better. She looked down. Then you asked about the dog food. I panicked. So I invented Melissa. Then you drove by the office. I lied again. Every lie made the next one easier to justify and harder to undo. She wiped at her eyes. I kept thinking there'd be a good moment to explain. There never was. No. There wasn't. Silence filled the room. Finally, I asked the question that mattered most. Did you ever love him? she answered before I finished speaking. No. Did you ever want to? No. Did he? Evan shook his head. My wife died. He looked at the framed picture on the mantel. I wasn't looking for another one. Nobody spoke for a long time. Eventually I stood. I'm not angry because you helped him. Lauren nodded. I know. I'm angry because you decided I couldn't handle the truth. That one landed. She didn't defend herself, didn't argue, didn't say I was overreacting. She simply nodded. You're right. The drive home was quiet. Lauren spoke first. I'll answer anything. I believe you. She looked surprised. But believing there wasn't an affair doesn't erase 6 months of lies. I know. And that's the part we're going to have to figure out. She looked out the passenger window. I'll do whatever it takes. For the first time in weeks, I believe she meant exactly what she said. Trust doesn't disappear all at once. It erodes. A small lie here, a convenient excuse there. Eventually you stop questioning the individual stories and start questioning the person telling them. Lauren hadn't betrayed me with another man. She'd betrayed me by deciding honesty was more dangerous than the truth. That wasn't something we fixed in a weekend. We started marriage counseling the following month. Not because we wanted someone to tell us who was right, because we needed to learn why we had stopped telling each other difficult things before they became impossible things. Lauren still visits Evan occasionally. Now she tells me before she goes. Sometimes I go with her. Scout still drops that same beat-up blue tennis ball at my feet every single time I walk through the door. I finally throw it. He never seems to get tired of chasing it. I guess some things don't need to be complicated. People usually do that part themselves.